Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you're joining from. I'm Reena Dayal, and I'm your host for the Thought Integrator podcast series. Today, we are going to be talking about 5G. We have with us Kaitki Agarwal, who is a serial entrepreneur. She's the founder, president, and CTO of A5G Networks. She also founded Parallel Wireless and drove Open RAN movement operations and product as chief product officer. So she's a serial entrepreneur. She's a result oriented executive with extensive leadership and management experience in wireless, wireline, and cable industries. She understands a great deal about global operations, building and leading geographically distributed high performance teams, and managing the products from conceptualization stage to evolving products to market leadership. And through her career, she's been working in the telecom sector, and she has more than 50 patents, which are either granted or in the pending state. So, welcome, Kaitki. Very glad to have you with us today. And one of the facts that I wanted to let everybody know is that Kaitki and I are classmates. We did our undergrad together at IIT Roorkee. So, a lot of history, a lot of common people that we know. And I've been witness to the journey that she's had as a serial entrepreneur, moving from taking bets on very new areas. And I continue to be amazed at the work that you do, Ketki. Very warm welcome to you. Thank you for taking the time.
Thanks, Reena. Thanks for inviting me and for the kind introduction. Really glad to be here.
Yeah, yes, it's such a pleasure. I just wanted to, sort of start the discussion by letting people know a little bit more about you and your entrepreneurial journey. Why don't you tell us who's Kaitki Agarwal, what really drives you, and a little bit about your entrepreneurial background.
Yeah, sure, definitely. So I have been in telecom industry for more than 20 years, and I have been entrepreneurial for most of my career. I have been founding member of several successful startups, as Reena mentioned, and then I decided to found my own company in 2012. And how it happened was in 2012, I was driving back home from work, and there was a point in my drive where my call will always drop, or I lose audio, even though I had full signal strength on my phone. This typically indicates network congestion and capacity issues. So this problem is in worse in rural areas where it is too expensive to put up cell coverage. Based on my personal experiences and seeing others with similar problems, I wanted to come up with a solution that would solve the capacity and coverage issues. But I know it's difficult to do the transformation while being a part of a large organization. So to make the transformation happen, sometimes you must start in a small and agile way and think of a solution with a clear mind and without any legacy baggage.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I knew that it's the time to move out and make and change things and make positive impact and do different things and transformation in the wireless industry. So that's when I founded Parallel Wireless, and I wanted, as I mentioned, I wanted to solve capacity and coverage issues. And it always starts with a simple problem realization, and you start challenging yourself to figure out how to solve that problem and envision it to a large transformation. So that's basically how I started my journey.
Wow. And then at some point in time, you decided to start A5G networks. What was the thing, what drove you to do that?
Yeah, so when before I start with A5G, I want to just give one data point from Parallel Wireless. So when we first launched our product in 2014 in Europe with the tier one operator, we received several thank you notes and thank you emails from the residents of that area where we launched the service. One lady had to previously drive her daughter like uh, 1.5 hours away to a library so that she can complete her homework, she can complete her assignment because they did not have any internet connectivity where they lived.
Mm-hmm.
So our technology made it possible to get them coverage, and then she also requested that we extend the coverage to people in other areas having this similar problem. So at that point, I realized that making the positive change in someone's life is much more valuable than making millions of dollars in business transactions or from the uh, great successful financial exit of the company. So that was one of the key point why I wanted to do a 5G and another company again, because I want to make positive impact not just in the industry and technology, but also in the community by providing better equipment, better services, better uh, technology that will really help people.
So,
So
and what does A5G focus on?
yeah, so basically, A5G is focused on. So there are different use cases that are being yeah, that are coming in the industry, like for example, better video and audio conference calls, and then remote work from home that we see in um, in the COVID situation. So what we wanted to do in A5G network is have better and improved mobile network infrastructure by providing the autonomous software. It's more technology centric, and we know that the networks are going to be very distributed and the data volume is going to be significant in the networks. So what A5G is doing is enabling the distributed mobile networks, and this is one of the other goal for A5G is to enable new business models and the 5G use cases for private and public networks, like where you can deploy the smart cities, connected cars, and so on. So that's where the charter of A5G networks. If in A5G, A stands for autonomous 5G. So A5G wants to enable uh, autonomous networks, self-driving networks, distributed networks.
All right. So, in the value chain for telecom, A5G would be the service provider to the large telecom vendors, right?
So A5G will be hosted software provider for telecom vendors or
Okay.
enterprises, both.
Got it. Got it. Thank you. And in terms of the parallel, coming back to parallel wireless, that is, where does that fit into the small cell technology and rural coverage? You talked about rural coverage, right? And I think
Mhm.
right now there's a big conversation going on. Even, there was a discussion in which the World Economic Forum was involved, where the conversation was that for the next stage, we want to have full global coverage, right? Which means
Uh-huh.
that all those parts of the world which are not fully, don't have a cell phone coverage, how do we reach the last mile? And of course, there are a whole of technologies that are contenders for that, right? Including satellite, direct reach through satellite. And then, of course, there's some proprietary solutions, but essentially, small cell networks also play a role there. And where does parallel wireless fit into that?
So parallel wireless focus is to enable macro networks, not so much of the small cell, and small cell come in different form factors: indoor small cell, outdoor small cell. So parallel wireless focus has been to target more of macro deployments, large scale deployments with their 2G and 4G technology. So that's where they are focusing on, and not so much on the small cell or private network, at least at this point. Based on, now I'm not part of parallel wireless, so I can say this based on the information that is available out there.
All right.
So,
All right. Sure. So for the benefit of people, the one of the reasons why I do this podcast is to take, very scientific and technical topics which are slightly difficult to understand for everyone, or where there is a lot of mixed kind of information that is available, and sort of have a discussion so that more and more people can understand what this is. No, so I'm pretty sure, when I talk to people who are not from the telecom or the tech industry, A lot of
Mhm.
them, just have some vague idea of what 5G is. They know that, a lot of new capability will be available. They'll get more bandwidth and stuff like that. But can we do a deeper dive into what is 5G and what all is it going to enable? And, what is really paving the way for 5G right now? What is really working in the favor of 5G and why the timing is right?
Mhm. Yeah. So, of course, when 5G started, um, every mobile technology typically has a 10-year cycle. So, for example, 4G started in 2009, 2010 timeframe, and it's almost reaching peak in most of the countries. And now we are starting with 5G, and typically that's has been the cycle. The evolution from 2G to 3G to 4G was about coverage and capacity,
Mm-hmm.
and it was about increasing data transfer speeds and data throughput. It was more about user to user communication, like subscriber to subscriber communication, providing capacity and coverage. So 2G and 3G, uh, so 2G and 3G was mostly used for making phone calls and some data applications using like with low data throughput, like SMS, web browsing, emails, and so on. And then 5G came in, and 5G brought in all IP high speed data for mobile networks. So with 4G networks, we made the transition from circuit switched voice to IP voice that we call voice over LTE. But 5G is very different um, than 2G, 3G, and 4G. 5G is about low latency. It's about machine to machine communications with a lot of sensors and Internet of Things and all. And it's also about user to machine communication and providing high data throughput of the order of Gbps. But it's not just about high throughput. And if you look at where 5G can be used, it has a lot of different use cases. It can be used for providing large system capacity to connect a very large number of devices. With 5G, we can enable new services like drone delivery, remote health monitoring, smart grids, industrial automation, the robotics that's used in the factory to uh, uh, do certain operations, fully immersive entertainment experience with like 100K 5G hotspots providing that level of experience. So you can see the capacity and scale that 5G can bring. And there is also some debate about in the enterprise scenario, in the industrial automation and digitalization, why do we need 5G? Why can't we just use Wi-Fi? So there are few key aspects, and it all depends on the use cases, what the problem you're trying to solve. So there are few key aspects of 5G that differentiates it from Wi-Fi, even Wi-Fi 6. One is interference management and mobility, the range, and the system capacity. Like if you want to have the movement indoor and outdoors, 5G will be better suited than Wi-Fi because of the mobility. So mobility is one of the key aspects. So
So,
in general, yeah, go ahead.
sorry to interrupt. So, just for people who, if you have a fixed assembly line, right, with
Mhm.
a lot of moving parts, but within the gamut of that assembly line, that might be better for Wi-Fi and with a gateway to the internet. But if you have like robots moving in and out of a warehouse, and there's
Mhm.
a large focus, and they move in through multiple buildings and in the common areas, and each of these robot needs to be signaling a lot of information, not just from a command and control perspective, but like you said, actually exchanging information so that they can perform things better and sending information back to some place. Then you would say that that's where the advantage of 5G comes in.
Yeah, yeah. Like,
Right.
or you have drones moving in and out of
Okay.
the facility, automated guided vehicles, and those type of scenarios. So that's where you will see more use cases and the use of 5G.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Please go ahead. I interrupted you there.
Yeah, no. So I was just talking about 5G, how why do we need 5G? So in general, 5G has broader impacts, right, than any other previous mobile technologies we have used in the past. And it's applicable for many domains. So that is one of the key aspects, that 5G is being applied and it's relevant for many domains such as healthcare, manufacturing, smart cities, connected cars, shipping and logistics, even gaming. So maybe I can briefly talk about current mobile networks, how it's like what are the challenges we have today. You think that will be helpful, Reena?
Absolutely. So, if we can, especially if we can talk about some of the challenges and how 5G is addressing it, right? So I think that'll help everybody correlate it much better.
Yeah, sure. So basically, current mobile networks are very closed and somewhat inflexible. It is very difficult today to make changes or bring new innovations and network transformations. It is designed for less variations, and it's designed for fixed functionality in the network. So current mobile networks are very centralized, and the workflow and overall life cycle management, they are very manual. So you need a lot of people on the ground to make the small change or network upgrade. So 5G is not just a mobile technology where you can just upgrade the radio and your core network and OSS BSS and start getting high throughput. It's a lot bigger than that. It has not just from the use case point of view, but also from if we want to really get the real full potential of 5G, then we have to have the fusion of a lot of different things to make it real. So when we say 5G, I kind of view 5G as that big umbrella with all the other things that are part of it. So a simple example is like as smartphones go through upgrade cycles, consumers push more data like photos and videos with better screens and cameras. And the video streaming will continue to push large volumes of data, as we all know. So to satisfy the data demands, and mobile operators densify their networks, that is, they add new towers and they put radio towers close to people. And this helps in two ways. One is increased capacity is added to the new towers, and better cell phone signal to the users. That further helps pushing more data by their smartphones. So in general, stronger signal means more bandwidth. So now with 5G, these effects further multiply, right? It becomes more visible, more prominent. And because operators are getting new spectrum for 5G, and then that enables them to push even more data. The spectrum is typically on mid to high band, requiring towers to be closer to users, and towers closer to user means more bandwidth, stronger signal. And these factors will cause more of a compounding effect on data growth and consumption. So as mobile phones get more compute, they get more power. And we have the 5G new spectrum and new services. The data demand, the data volume in the network is going to increase significantly. So what we are trying to do is make networks ready for this data growth. To address the data demand, we know that mobile operators will add new cell towers to their network, whether it's in some cases, in some developing countries, 4G capacity expansion, or rolling out 4G and before they go to 5G, or even do the new 5G network build out in the developed countries. So networks will have multiple layers of macro and small cells, like you were mentioning, for capacity and for capacity expansion and coverage. So with this significantly increased data volume in the network and many smaller networks for enterprises, smart cities, connected cars, and our existing mobile networks will need many fundamental changes to enable the true potential of 5G and the 5G use cases. So some of these use cases, such as augmented reality, virtual reality, will bring new business models and revenue streams. But at the same time, it puts new demand on how you want to create the mobile network infrastructure. What are the changes we need to do to really give the quality of experience that users are expecting to get, the subscribers are expecting to get from 5G. Like if the mobile network infrastructure is not up to the mark, even if you enable 5G and start doing these use cases, you're not going to see that user experience that you would expect, and then slowly it will stop. It will lose traction. So it is very, yeah. Go ahead, Reena.
I'm saying it's also going to be a, given the infrastructure requirements that are, expanding for 5G, given all the considerations that you just talked about, it's also going to be a fine balance of being able to forecast usage, invest in it, and have the right business model to make profit out of it, right? While keeping enough, while having really good forecasting ability, so that you do not end up creating bottlenecks, right? And the moment you have bottlenecks, because it is more distributed, chances are that experience will exponentially go bad across different areas, right? So a lot is dependent on the service provider and how they are building the infrastructure, and how they are, how the telecom vendors are actually, sort of planning this.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the key, because in 4G, mobile operators spent a lot of money in building the infrastructure, and they are having tough time getting the return on investment. So if we build the 5G network infrastructure the right way, it's not just going to serve the needs of 5G and allow them to enable new use cases. It will also serve as the foundation and pave the path to go to 6G. Right. So that's
a very good point, because so that's what, I think this is my cue to ask you the next question, which I was very curious about, is 5G paving the path to 6G, and we don't talk like that for 4G, or how especially 3G to 4G movement in that context. So could you explain a little bit more in depth as to how 5G is paving the path for 6G, and what will 6G mean? So for example, if you can really give a real example of how a particular scenario looks in 5G and how it will look in 6G, so that everybody can understand it.
Yeah. So see, there are certain technologies and concepts that we are bringing in 5G today, and even though we may just be scratching the surface at this point, but these changes, like I talked about, making the network distributed, bringing the data closer to where it is being consumed, it requires complete mindset change to do things in a new way. You will see more automation, like use of data. So we are generating a lot of data, not just from the consumer data point of view. Like our networks are generating significantly large amount of data, and that needs to be managed. It needs to be consumed to make more sense, to give us observability in the network by doing analytics, and see how we can make our network infrastructure better, how we can enable the new services. So these are the fundamental changes that we need to bring in 5G. So 5G is not just a mobile technology that we where we can say that these changes, once we enable these changes, it's going to solve all the problems. So to realize 5G, we need the fusion of many things, like cloud native networks, AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning for bringing automated lifecycle management, network optimizations, distributed architectures, energy saving, keeping the sustainability goals in mind. So these are all fundamental things, and that's why I was calling it as a fusion of many things to enable 5G. And these things are going to also serve as the foundational elements for 6G network. So a lot of time we think it's about spectrum, radio access network, core network, OSS, BSS, and just upgrade it. And there you have the new generation of the mobile technology. No, that is not the case. It needs lot of thinking, lot of uh, like fundamental foundational things that we need to think about, how we can provide the best service for our use cases. Like if we want to enable a low latency applications, what are the things that will be involved in providing the low latency that we are talking about? Like instead of 10 millisecond, we want to have 1 millisecond. So what are the key ingredients of this that we need to enable in the network? So 5G is all about services and enabling these services to meet user expectation in the underlying communication infrastructure has to go through the significant transformation. And that's where you may have seen some of the news that hyperscalers are also getting involved in the telecom and 5G infrastructure. So that's all going to come together to create the real 5G distributed infrastructure. And once we have this distributed infrastructure where we have started using the technologies like machine learning, we are using machine learning, we are using more automation, more autonomous behavior. And that's where more of 6G concepts are going to start coming in. And that's how at least today 6G is being defined, to capture some of these elements as the foundation for 6G, such as AI native networks, distributed networks, sustainability, and open APIs, open interfaces. So those are going to be the key aspects of 6G. And that's what will bring us a few steps closer to 6G. So
okay. So that's great. I think we talked about what 5G will enable, how the whole architecture is going to be completely different. And I think when you talked about the fact that it's not a direct transition, that mindset really comes from 2G to 3G transition, which was a simpler transition, and it was more about upgrading your OSS and BSS stacks and things like that. And of course, now there is fundamental transformation that is happening, so that we can cater to this whole lot of other technologies that are defining the world that we live in, right? So it is all coming together. In my mind, 5G sort of becomes the backbone for making the communication of all of that happen. And since
yeah.
we are living in a hyper-connected world, which wants to be even more connected with machines coming in, I think at the core of it is the telecom networks that will enable that. So, so from a technology standpoint, I see that as a very crucial turning point in the history of technology as we move to 5G and 6G, because a lot of the promise of many emerging technologies is going to get fulfilled, because communication is the key, right? That's the key interface or the backbone that will make it happen. So hence the importance of this topic. Now, in terms of transition, because it is not like a straight, today you were 4G, you become 5G. It's a messy transition. It can have multiple approaches to how the transition happens. How do you see the transitions happening across the world? Where are they? And could you share some insights into that?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the when we transitioned to 4G, it was a big transition because 4G brought in all data, like all IP. Then 5G transition is also a big transition, because I view 5G transition as the foundation for 6G. If we do it right, if we think about it, how we want to enable these new services, what we want to do in 5G, we can create the network, we can make the changes in the network to enable it, the services even for 6G. And how it's happening in some deployments, there are two flavors of 5G. One is called 5G NSA, non-standalone, and the other one is 5G standalone. So 5G non-standalone uses the existing 4G infrastructure, and many mobile operators don't want to go through the complete network transformation today, and they want to continue to use their existing infrastructure, get more value out of their existing network. So these operators are going with 5G NSA and reusing part of their existing network. Some operators are directly going with the 5G standalone networks, like in US, T-Mobile and Verizon have deployed 5G SA networks. And worldwide, there are many 5G deployments happening, but today, most of them are non-standalone. So you will see more standalone deployments between 2023 to 2024. In some of the like advanced countries, like developed countries, I should say, they have deployed more of 5G networks, but in some of the developing countries, still it's more of 4G. And that's what is going to get transformed to 5G between 2023 to 2024 during that time frame.
That could also be because, the overall adoption cycle has been different, right? For example, 4G adoption itself has, just happened in many of the developing countries, right? I mean, just very recently. And it was a huge infrastructure shift, a lot of investments that have gone in. So it kind of makes business sense for these entities to, sort of stage it out, right? Initially, sort of rely on the 4G network and then take it forward to the next level. Now, from a 5G perspective, I was very surprised, I think, earlier last year. And then over a period of time, there was a lot of this nonsense, if you ask me, around, how 5G is going to impact, what's happening to birds, and, all kinds of weird stuff about the impact of 5G technology, which was a lot of misinformation, right? And a lot of groups which are protesting, to me, these kind of groups seem similar to the kind of people who say that the earth is flat. There are flat earthers, right? Like people who believe, despite all the scientific evidence, that the earth is flat, right? So now there is, the mistake that you do, which I did, was that once you go and read one of those articles, all the search engines think that you want to read more of this stuff. So I got literally bombarded with a lot of stuff around, the disadvantages of 5G and, all this weird stuff. What are your thoughts on that? And what are your thoughts on that first, from a scientific perspective? How do you want to clarify that? And then clarify it in a common man's language perspective. If you could do that, that will be a great help. I think that will be the crux of today's discussion, which we want to cut out separately and put it there for people to listen.
Yeah, sure. So I will actually start with the issue we have been reading a lot about, and about the flights and the interference and so on.
So maybe we'll come to that later, because that's a genuine case. So we want to address, we don't want to confuse people. We want to just address the misinformation, the stuff that is nonsense, really, right? And in terms of how health hazards can be there with 5G, the whole thing is, sort of revolving around health issues around 5G, right? And and the fact that there was some amazingly weird implication that COVID is happened because of 5G, right? So I hope people understand that that's not the case, but we would love to hear it from you, right? And so that
so I think in a lot of times we just, to be honest, laugh at it, and because 5G is not even deployed in a lot of places where these news are coming from. So I'm
Right.
not sure how 5G can create all these issues, and they can see birds having the problems, or it's creating COVID. So um, I in terms of the scientific explanation, I think most of these issues are being raised because of concerns with the different spectrum and the radiation that may create issues. But there is no scientific evidence, and all these spectrum frequencies are approved by FCCs and different authorities in different countries. So there is no issue with like if there was an issue with any radiation and impacting human health and other factors in the environment, it wouldn't have been approved and uh, used for the mobile technologies. So I don't think there's any issue with 5G technology as such, or the spectrum and radiation that is being talked about. In terms of the making it visible to people who are getting concerned, I think some things can be done in a better way to just come out with more simplified ways of explaining things and telling people, see, that's how the technology works, that's how the RF propagation works, and the radiation, it's not going to impact anyone in any way.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
giving
in
examples of the value of, the spectrum of the radiation, and correlating it with examples of how we are surrounded by radiation. We are also ourselves radiating all the time, right? So
yeah,
radiation is, just a very generic word, right? In that
yeah,
sense.
yeah,
And people
yeah,
just get carried away with it when they don't understand what it is. Uh,
right.
so, so that's great. But then there are some real issues also on the ground in terms of, we heard that, aircrafts had, the especially the aircrafts may have some issues based on certain spectrums. And could you talk a little bit about that problem and what's happening there?
Yeah, yeah, sure, definitely. So, as you know, the USA has auctioned C band in the range of 3700 to 3980 megahertz frequency range for commercial operation of 5G.
Mm-hmm.
And AT&T and Verizon have gone live with that frequency on actually this year on 19 January.
Mm-hmm.
And the aviation safety during takeoff and landing, especially during bad weather, depends on the radar base altimeter that operates at 4200, between 4200 and 4400 megahertz range. So
Got
if an onboard radar of an airplane uses an RF filter that has a wide band of spurious like emission on transmit side and limited ability to filter out that emission in the adjacent channel on the receiver side, on the receive side, the radar will need a large range of vacant spectrum on either side for the operation to avoid interference. So
Mm-hmm.
if there is emission in the expected vacant range, there will be interference impacting the radar's ability to estimate the altitude accurately. And that was basically the concern raised by FAA. So the 5G spectrum was actually approved in 2020. The C band was approved in 2020, auctioned in February last year. And so that was the time FAA could have done the investigation, made sure it's not going to cause any impact with their altimeter. But I think they waited until it was deployed and it was about to go live and raised their concerns. But now enough investigation has been done, and it's mostly sorted out. FAA has cleared about 80% of the planes that there is no interference issues. So that was basically the issue, mostly related to the interference, because those two bands were kind of close, and They've
There
had
was
to
a
make sure.
possibility of and then lives get at risk, right? If
Right.
you interfere with the landing and taking off mechanisms of the airplane,
Right.
right? So, what would be your advice, for 5G adoption for India and
Uh,
otherwise, right? You
yeah.
you decide what you want to talk about here.
Right. So most of the developed countries, so I'll give some data point here. So most of the developed countries like China, South Korea, and the US, 4G has peaked. In many other countries, uh, like India and other developing countries, 4G still has significant headroom for growth. And like the BSNL is still trying to deploy 4G, they're still trying to roll out 4G before they get the 5G spectrum and so on. So overall, and I've heard that in India, by end of this year, there will be 5G spectrum available to operators. So overall, 5G will account for around 80% of the uh, uh, expenditure from the operators over the next 5 years.
Okay.
And this data is basically indicating that in the next 5 years, we will see a lot of 5G deployments as the spectrum starts becoming available and the developing countries start transitioning from 4G to 5G. So that will be the cycle for them, like around 2023, 2024 timeframe, they will start deploying more 5G networks. My view is that basically for 5G adoption, best approach will be to create the network with some of the key aspects that will allow smoother transition to the next G or new services.
Mm-hmm.
So while operators are going through the significant transformations of their network for 5G SA, because 5G NSA, they are reusing a lot of existing infrastructure. They don't have to make it cloud native and makes the bigger transformations. But when they really go for 5G standalone, they need larger transformations. So when since they're already doing it, they should try to bring more innovative solutions. They should try to bring more innovation that will allow them to reduce power consumption, reimagine the end-to-end network all the way from radio access network to core network, OSS, BSS, bring more artificial intelligence, machine learning type of functionality, make it secure, bring additional security, because once you have these smaller networks, as I mentioned about with smart cities, private networks, or connected cars, it's going to be very different or heterogeneous environment. So security is going to be a key aspect of that, and try to bring the distributed architecture from the very beginning and not as an afterthought. So this will allow them to generate new revenue and get a better return on investment, as the network will already be there. It's already ready for newer technologies as well as for moving on to 6G. So as industry, we should take more proactive approach and bring in right technology now instead of waiting and doing it at a later point.
So that's great advice. And also, in terms of the partnerships will hinge heavily on the business to business, large, and not just, one to one, but many to one kind of partnerships will play a very big role in some of these solutions, right? And I
Mhm.
think it's also a little bit of a patience playing game because, it's all happening at the same time, right? I mean, while, in the IoT based solutions have been, revving up for the last 3-4 years, especially. But
Mhm.
then this is the true test of how that IoT itself can take off, right? And it's
Mhm.
so when you have several technologies where innovation is happening in parallel, there's also a time period which the environment takes or the business environment takes for things to settle in, right? And returns are also pushed out a little bit. So I think from a from an industry perspective, not just the telecom industry, but all the large the cloud vendors, the people who are providing IoT based services and software platforms for that, all other people who are dealing with infrastructure related to industrial for industry 4.0 and so on. I think there is this huge amount of collaboration that is required at this point in time to actually take full advantage of what is going to unfold, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be very different world. So I'm always at the center of the technology, thinking about these things. And you mentioned IoT and a lot of different things that are happening, not just in the telecom, but in the healthcare industry, where we are trying to use 5G for certain things. The remote health monitoring, telehealth are some of the use cases that are going to start becoming more visible. As you know, before COVID, people were not really comfortable with some of these things like telehealth, and they always want to go in person and get it
Yeah.
checked and so on. But now it's becoming more of a norm, and it will, even after, like, if there is a post COVID, and I hope there is, it's going to stay. Like a lot of these things, remote working, work from home, online education, and some of these healthcare trends are going to stay and going to use more and more, even in the financial industry, right? The stock trading and all, you want to do a lot of transactions using your phone, and the timing matters there. So the low latency use cases are not just the augmented reality, virtual reality, but also these type of applications. And once you have given more powerful handset in users' hands, they will find new use cases, new way of using the technology, and that will put some requirements on our networks that we haven't even thought about. So that always happens in every technology cycles. That is the case. And in 5G or the future mobile technologies, it's not just going to be the handset. And even today, with 4G, we have started seeing it, that all the other devices, IoT devices, like your watch and devices that we use in our day-to-day life, they all have some kind of mobile technology built in. So it's not just the smartphones, it's all these other devices that are also going to start connecting to the network and start going to generate a lot of data. And I think the most important thing that we need to do in 5G or in any other technology or in general communication infrastructure is the management of the data that is being generated, like not just from the storage point of view, but also how to make the best use of that data to present something more meaningful and convert it into like how to monetize it, basically.
Right. Business models will also play a very, very important role apart from the partnerships in terms of how things pan out.
Yeah.
That's great. Now I have one more question for you. What is your advice for entrepreneurs?
Yeah, sure. So, as entrepreneurs, we always go through a lot of uncertainties, and in certain cases, these uncertainties will bring fear to your mind. But what I have experienced and what I have seen is that you must sit down and just deal with your fear, question, and think through all the possibilities, and that you will realize that you are scared for no reason. Never stop believing in yourself. That is the most important thing. Don't give yourself hard time for a mistake. Learn from it and just do better next time, and uh, continue to believe in yourself. Once you pick a course, you need to train yourself, focus, and run. It will be best if we keep raising the bar for ourselves to do better. Learning and improvement should never stop. So, that is my advice for entrepreneurs.
Great. That's actually quite good advice for everyone. And do you have any specific advice for women leaders and women entrepreneurs?
So, I think it's, I have, we have experienced different things as women leaders, women entrepreneurs, and uh, what I would say is that women entrepreneurs or women leaders should strategize and think through what they really want to do. Once you have thought about what you want to do, you should just start executing on it and not worry too much about the external factors. And once you have put your mind to doing something, just stay focused, don't give up, and continue moving down that path.
I think that's great advice. Sometimes people can get really bogged down about what is happening. Very often, just running with your strength and capability is enough to break the mold. And, of course, as a woman entrepreneur or as a woman leader, you might have to do that more often. You may have to assert yourself more often and, stand up for what you stand for more often. But then that's the key, right? Self-belief and self-support is the key, whether it's a man or a woman, right? Especially if you're an entrepreneur. So that's wonderful. That's, I think with that we come towards the almost towards the end of our session. Anything else you want to talk about, Kaitki? Maybe we can reminisce a little bit about Roorkee. Huh?
Yeah, sure.
I'm pretty sure if we discuss certain things about, so we passed out in 93 for everybody's, we're giving away a little bit of how old we are by telling you that. But, some of this, the world has really changed. The education environment has also changed a lot since then. So I'm pretty sure these are just, I remember somebody was calling me for they said, come and speak to our students about your college experience. And I told them, listen, I'm very happy to come and speak and motivate people. Don't ask me to come and speak about my college experience to today's college students, because they'll be like, God knows which age is she coming from, right? So, they will not be able to correlate because connections, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have cell phones at that time, right?
We didn't have cell phones,
Yeah, we didn't have cell phones. I remember the first cell phone was when I was quite a few years after we started working, actually.
Yeah, actually the first cell phone I had when I moved to US in 95. That's when I got my first cell phone.
And I think in India it was 96 or 97, much later.
Yeah. Actually, and these cell phones used to be so big, right? I still have those old ones.
Expensive. You got charged for incoming and outgoing both, isn't it?
Yeah. It
so incoming was chargeable in India, which, at that point in time, and it was, I remember I got an office phone. I had got an office phone and it was a huge deal. And anybody who has an office phone is like they are made in life kind of thing. Now everybody has a cell phone and the whole thing has changed, right? It's been remarkable how the telecom industry has actually achieved what it has in terms of the kind of coverage, especially in India, which is a mobile only country. It's not just mobile first. A lot of the people on the ground, like, if you go and talk to an auto, you want to get an auto, the auto person has a smartphone. You go, and they, through Ola, you can get an auto. And the vegetable vendor also has a smartphone. So, a lot of people may not have any other computing capability, but they are using a telecom network through their phones, and they are connected, and education is happening through that. It's completely transformed people's lives. So I think hats off to people like you who have been dedicated your career into the sector. And I want to take the opportunity to thank you for taking the time. And it was lovely having this discussion.
Reena, thank you for inviting me. It was a great discussion. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was great catching up as well. Okay.
Yeah, it was great
Thank you.
catching.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
See you then. Bye.